modern world, great leaders resolve their conflicts with words. Jet launcher. Carbon bombing. Tomahawk missiles.
What's up everyone, Dakota here. I recently took a nostalgic trip back to a timeless RTS classic from 2003 known as Command & Conquer Generals. Being part of my gaming childhood, I vividly remember staying up until 4 AM or so playing this game with my best friend. It remains one of my favorite real-time strategy games of all time, so let's dive right into what makes it so great after all these years. This review will just be about the base game, and I'll talk about the 0-hour expansion at another time. EA thankfully ported Generals and a few other Command & Conquer games to Steam in March of 2024 as part of the Ultimate Collection. I did run into an issue right away when trying to launch Generals in the correct screen resolution. Luckily, there are quite a few helpful guides within the community pages that can help mediate this problem, and I did finally manage to get the base game and expansion running at a 1920 by 1080 resolution. However, I do feel like EA simply should have had this set up correctly from the beginning, even if it is an older game. A different, though smaller issue was how cramped your view looks with the bottom toolbar enabled. This is the most the game allows you to zoom out, which isn't very far considering some units have weaponry with longer range than what you can actually see. Yes, there are mods or edits to the configuration files that can fix this, but I'm still taking this issue into account for the sake of the review. Generals released in 2003, so obviously the graphics aren't going to be the best compared to games nowadays. Honestly though, the vehicles, buildings, and landscapes don't look too terrible as long as you don't zoom in too closely, like on the trees. Also, I can't help but laugh when the blocky human character models are shown up close. I mean, just look at these guys.
Train for perfection.
Most of the cutscenes are made within the game world in a simplistic way that works well. They happen at the beginning and end of missions, just using the maps and a voiceover to set the scene.
You are surrounded. Throw down your weapons and exit your vehicles. Get off!
I did experience a few visual glitches here and there, like this one where the map just starts disappearing, but overall the cutscenes were done well with the resources they had.
Under fire. Firing attack. Tiger leader reporting. Target eliminated.
Being a real-time strategy game, the gameplay loop essentially follows building your base, collecting resources, and destroying your enemy's base and army. Obviously, there are a lot of smaller things that go into this concept that make these games unique and stand on their own. Generals offers an extensive amount of buildings you can construct for your base. There's even utility buildings spread throughout the maps that you can capture.
China can now use this building.
Your infantry can also garrison into empty civilian buildings to keep themselves better protected, which is one of my favorite tactics. These are especially useful for creating choke points while you're fighting in huge cities that have multiple roads and entry points, and the snipers are a little overpowered with them. The game has 3 factions to choose from, all with their own strengths and weaknesses. The USA obviously focuses on advanced technology and its superior air force capabilities,
Delivering payload.
while China has a focus on its sheer number of infantry and powerful vehicles. Being a terrorist organization, the Global Liberation Army, or GLA, employs toxins, self-bombers, and other improvised units, but it has no air force whatsoever except through its faction's powers. Generals does a great job at making all 3 factions feel and play differently, while also striking a nice system of advantages and disadvantages. The USA units are obviously the most expensive, but that faction's superior technology makes up for it. While the GLA has some of the weaker units, everything costs less and the faction doesn't require power plants to operate. For China, its ground units and tanks are the most powerful in the game, but its infantry can be easily countered by the GLA's toxins, and the USA's air force is pretty capable of handling its tanks.
Unit lost.
General's powers are some of my favorite mechanics the game has. You have to rank up your general and unlock new abilities by defeating enemies. Some of these abilities are more support based, like creating a healing circle around your troops, while others help with your offensive capabilities. Getting to a 5-star general level unlocks awesome and devastating airstrike attacks. Some individual units have a few cool and unique abilities as well. For example, the flamethrower unit can cover a large area in fire. For me, the most satisfying way to play generals was by hunkering down with lines of defenses and then using multiple squadrons of fighter jets and bombers to hit incoming forces and enemy bases. I found that coordinating strikes between my Air Force and General's powers was the most fun I had the entire game. USA's Aurora bombers are quick, deadly, and a joy to use. Your super weapons are the culmination of your building tree, and it's always a ton of fun to blow up enemy units and bases with them. USA's particle cannon is more user involved because you can control where it hits as it fires, while China's nuclear missile and the GLA Scud launcher are simpler, but just as effective and entertaining to watch. One specific issue I kept running into was that my units wouldn't always aggro when they were attacked. This was a persistent problem when facing enemies that had longer range weapons. My infantry and vehicles would just sit there taking hits even though their aggressors were right down the path and just out of their sight. You have to keep close tabs on your forces just to make sure they don't get wiped out without a fight by this type of situation. And it can get annoying having to micromanage this aspect of your armies at times. If there was one thing I felt like could have been added to the game, I would have to say that would be boat units or vehicles. The obvious problem here is that they will only be useful on a handful of maps, as not all of them include access to a large and strategic pool of water. That said, I do think boats would fit right in with the overall feel of the game's units. Skirmish mode is really fun too. It's highly customizable with how you can set up your teams, like what factions everyone will play as, how many allies or enemies you will have, and where everyone will appear on the map. You could lose countless hours in this game mode, and it's a perfect way to try out all the different factions, units, and generals' powers. However, the enemy AI doesn't seem to know what to do whenever resources become scarce, even when they're set to brutal difficulty. Each faction has specific units or buildings that are designed to make them monetarily self-sufficient, but I've noticed that the AIs just don't take advantage of this system very well, which means if you can survive the initial heavier attacks, you can usually mop up what's left of them by being patient.
Congratulations, General. You have been promoted.
The main story of Generals begins with the China campaign, where a large terrorist group known as the GLA is threatening the world with destruction while regularly targeting civilian populations in its attacks. It's an organized and huge terrorist group unlike anything we've ever seen in modern times, with the ability to raise numerous armies and fight powerful nations all over the world on their territory. After several attacks, the Chinese began counter-terror operations to rid their country of the group. When it comes to characters, I will say Generals is lacking in that department. Your main quote-unquote characters would be your hero units that have a little bit more dialogue during the missions, but for the most part, it's just random soldiers talking or advisors giving you directions.
Greetings, Comrade General. I am Lin Zhang, your Senior Intelligence Officer.
The main character is essentially you, the general of each army in 3 campaigns. That said, the story is more of an overview of these events, rather than a close following of a few characters experiencing them, so it's not like having fleshed out characters was warranted in the first place. Each campaign comes with 7 missions apiece. One of my favorite Chinese missions involved China and the USA working together to clear out a GLA-infested city. You're encouraged to use USA-provided carpet bomb strikes against large building districts, and you basically have to flatten the whole area. It's great fun and makes good use of the game's destruction mechanics. You can destroy entire buildings and other objects on the map as needed. The effects are nice, and the buildings even show multiple stages of damage. I found that the missions are better when you're set up with a place to build up your base and army, rather than when you're given a preset number of troops that you have to use for a special operation. Something about how these missions were set up just didn't click well for me, but they were at least still a nice change of pace. My favorite mission type by far was when you had to defend certain pathways or positions from enemy convoys. These ones felt similar to tower defense games in a way, but crossed over with RTS mechanics. There was a significant difficulty boost in the final mission of the Chinese campaign when compared to previous levels. It was so much so that I ended up having to form a defensive line just to survive, as resources were limited and located in awkward to defend positions. With overwhelming enemy forces coming early, I decided to sacrifice units as scouts so that I could then chip away at the enemy base using my general's powers. It was definitely a tough ending to the campaign, especially with Scud missiles raining down on me as well. I will say the hacker units were absolutely clutch in this scenario. Next up is the campaign that follows the GLA. You can immediately tell that they aren't holding anything back. Some of the first few missions involved the GLA killing thousands of civilians before then attacking United Nations convoys for supplies. I did enjoy the mission objectives here more than those of the Chinese missions, and I felt like there was a nice variety throughout this campaign. As I mentioned before, this faction does play a bit differently than the others. They rely more on improvised vehicles and weapons in comparison, as well as biological warfare. The tunnel system is an interesting concept because it allows you to quickly move troops across the battlefield from your base to other tunnels. It's a useful tool because you can keep up the momentum when attacking, and it gives the GLA a maneuverability advantage since its units aren't as powerful. The most satisfying units to use from the GLA's roster were the bomb trucks,
For the GLA!
Well done, gentlemen. You have reached a higher rank.
and the rocket buggies. Both allow you to easily clear a path for your forces when attacking enemy bases. I did notice that their general powers were more utility-based rather than attacking-based like airstrikes or artillery. Other than unlocking more powerful units, I mostly relied on the rebel ambush to spawn infantry units behind enemy lines,
Our day has come.
and the anthrax bomb. Final mission of the GLA campaign was incredibly easy in comparison to the Chinese campaign's last mission. I'm not sure if there was a problem with the AI of the enemy factions, but it seemed like they only rarely attacked my base throughout the mission. The USA would occasionally use their particle cannon, however the Chinese never used their ready-to-fire nuclear missile. Its countdown timer just remained at 0 for the whole mission until I destroyed it. For those reasons, I did find the conclusion of the GLA campaign to be underwhelming, but it was still a fun time.
No cost is too great.
The final campaign Command & Conquer Generals has to offer begins by showing off the might of the US military. This faction has the most technologically advanced units in the game by far.
Fire at will.
I'm hit! Let's finish him off! Off the left! Bravo down! We got Vader! Reload! Help over here! Fire!
And it really shows through its air power. Any missions that let you have an airfield were automatically top tier in my eyes, as I would begin having fun with bombing runs as soon as I could.
Bombing phase cleared.
This campaign is full of great levels, including scenarios where you have to land and clear out a beach, Normandy style, and another where you have to protect several convoys of retreating units. I do wish that the Raptor jets and Aurora bombers were available earlier on, but luckily the final few levels offer up large enemy bases for you to bomb and destroy with these units. One of the funniest and saddest things I happened to record was my lone high-ranking ranger taking on a GLA group by himself and winning, only for him to limp right into an enemy demo trap.
Let's get in there.
Unit lost.
I was heartbroken. Story-wise, Generals takes a different path than many games do nowadays, depicting the United States and China as being close allies fighting against a common enemy. The developers did sneak in a mission that pitted the aforementioned factions against each other, and they did so by introducing a rogue Chinese general into the fray. The 6th mission has you fighting against this general along with the GLA. The final mission of the USA plays right into my favorite part of the game, and basically encourages the use of the Air Force to break down a huge GLA fortress. It is designed well and almost feels like a siege from the Total War series. Plenty of enemy patrols come out your way too, and this is a great opportunity to show off the might of the Comanche helicopters.
How about those rocket decimal targets?
In my eyes, it's definitely an enjoyable way to end the final campaign. Overall, Command & Conquer Generals is a timeless RTS classic that still holds up to this day, even through the nostalgia. The game just has a way of pulling you back into it. There were several times while I was gathering footage for this video where I went ahead and completed most, if not all, of the mission I was recording. It wasn't even because I needed the footage, but because I wanted to keep playing. I think that's a testament to just how good General's core gameplay is. I'm going to give this game a score of an 8.7 out of 10.
Enemy perimeter. Range 200. They're everywhere. Watch the left. Reload. Roger that.
Nice shot! Bravo down!